The Lepcha community is the indigenous community of the Darjeeling Hills and Sikkim. Mai Liang, as they say, is their ancestral land. It is the Lepcha word for hidden paradise. According to the Lepchas, in the old times, Mai Liang stretched over the eastern Himalaya up to Titalia into the vast plains of India, now in Bangladesh, as well as other parts of Bhutan and Nepal. The land of the Lepchas had been hidden to the world beyond the Himalayas before the British colonization of Darjeeling and Sikkim in 1835.
The colonization led to dramatic and constant shifts in territorial boundaries and human geography of Darjeeling Hills and Sikkim. Darjeeling Tract, an integral part of the Kingdom of Sikkim before 1835, became a new geopolitical unit under British sovereign, while the Kingdom of Sikkim had been reduced to British suzerainty under their tutelage.
Bhutanese occupied Kalimpong had been added to the colonial territory after the Anglo-Bhutan War of 1864. Throughout the 19th century, the colonial mapping saw the first major mapping of the Eastern Himalaya into territorial, geographical and ethnic units. The hidden paradise of the Lepchas no longer remained hidden. As the indigenous community of the land, they were evicted from their land, Mai Liang, displaced from pristine tradition, lost cultural memory and ethnic dignity. They became fugitives in their own land. Lepcha shared the same fate with most indigenous communities in the Western Hemisphere and other parts of the world. Impoverished, backward, homogenized by dominant cultures and subjected to majoritarian intimidation and exclusion for centuries, the Lepcha community remained within the attributes of primitive, savage and a dying race. But the story of the Lepcha community in the Darjeeling Hills is not about their despair and doom. It is about their spirit, vigor, resilience and resurgence. It is about their lonesome journey towards life, hope and consciousness. The Lepchas lost their land, but in their imagination, Mai Liang remained immemorial. It is woven in their memory, which is inexorably linked with the hills, the rivers, the trees, forests, and their history. The Lepchas of Darjeeling Hills have been engaged in reviving their Mai Liang, a symbolic Mai Liang which is essentially a cultural space and integral to their root. Who are the Lepchas? The ethnic name of the community is wrong. and hence their language is known as Rongring. In fact, the nomenclature as Lepcha is a distorted anglicized form of the word Lapche, coined by the Nepalese immigrants to Darjeeling. The term literally means scurrilous speaker. The British improvised the term as Lepcha. The Lepcha community is one of the oldest communities in the world. The British colonizers tagged them as primitive and savage, and the image still persists in popular imagination. Yes, indeed. Like all other old communities in the world, Lepcha community did have a so-called primitive past. They survived on hunting, gathering, fishing, and agriculture for their subsistence and survival. They had and still have profound command over nature, trees, herbs, and medicinal plants. The rivers and hills in the region still carry Lepcha names. The Lepchas, I think, are one of the few tribes in this region who have names for every bird species that you see, every butterfly species, every grass species, every bamboo species. So what I mean to say is they are very rich in terms of natural history. If you look at the Lepcha glossary of birds, we find that they have specific names, and these names are not just chosen randomly. These are names which have been created, and the particular species in question is spoken of and named, keeping in mind its plumage, its color, its characteristics. So these point to the fact that the Lepchas are born naturalists. The Lepchas used to worship the nature, most importantly Mount Kanchenjunga. As it is believed, the first Lepcha man and woman, Nazong Nyu and Fadong Ting, were created by God from the virgin snow off the peak of Mount Kanchenjunga, or Kingsum Zangbu. In Lepcha language, Kingsum Zangbu means the auspicious forehead peak. There is no concept of heaven and hell in Lepcha worldview. It is believed that the departed Lepcha soul returns to Pumju, the source of origin, or Mount Kanchenjunga. Mount Kanchenjunga is their guardian deity, and Mun and Bungthing, the traditional priest and priestesses, protect them in spiritual and temporal life. The Lepchas developed an ingenious technology in building architecture. Traditional Lepcha houses are perfect examples of eco-friendly and climate-resistant technology that the community developed in their so-called primitive days. The new leadership have revived the technology and built a few new traditional houses in the Darjeeling Hills.
You see this beautiful traditional Lepcha house. It is entirely made from the local products like the bamboo up there, and of course the wood, the beams here, the earth. Therefore, this house is really environmental friendly house. Not a single nail or iron used to build this house. It is interlocked with each other. Therefore, the house is very strong.
But they were not an oral community. They had their language, script, literary and textual tradition, and their language was their aesthetic medium. They had religious scripts as well as poetry, song, and folklore. Most importantly, they had their music. The Lepcha community developed a rich textual tradition. The texts are known as Namtho Namthar. Most of the Namtho Namthars are religious texts, but some were written on aesthetic style to be used in poetry, song, folklore, etc. The old Namtho Namthars are large scrolls made of thick, folded, handmade papers. They have their traditional grammar book called Lazong. Lazongs systematized letters, vowels, diacritical marks, circumflex signs, and other affixed signs are combined, conjoined, and arranged in alphabetical list, forming syllables and monosyllables. The first hint of trouble in the Lepcha paradise happened in 1642 when the Tibetans treacherously took over Sikkim, of which Darjeeling was also included. Many people were also proselytized into Tibetan Lamaism. But the Tibetan rule for the Lepcha community is not remembered by the people as a saga of distrust, displacement, and dispossession. Lepchas and the Tibetans used to intermarry. Many Lepchas were retained within the close circle of ministers, nobility, and army generals who enjoyed power and trust of the king. Following the Tibetan conquest, the Lepcha community, however, virtually lost their political control over their land and territory.
This slow disintegration of the life and land of the Lepchas had seen mortal blow during the British occupation of Darjeeling by a deed of grant on 1st February 1835.
Apparently, the Darjeeling tract was taken over by the British to build a sanatorium for subaltern British soldiers. But the real reason was strategic. Firstly, they wanted to contain the Nepalese military expansion in the east. Secondly, to conquer Tibet and open up trade in Tibet and China. And thirdly, to contain the Russian expansion in Tibet and the Indian subcontinent.
Captain Lloyd was the major actor in signing the deed of grant of Darjeeling tract from the Raja of Sikkim.
On securing the Darjeeling tract, he adopted two significant measures. In the first place, he issued a proclamation that the residents of Darjeeling tract, who were mainly the Lepchas, would have to abide by the laws of the colonial rulers. They no longer remained the subject of Sikkim Raja. Secondly, in his correspondence with the Raja of Sikkim, he persistently referred to the Darjeeling tract as uninhabited land. It was indeed a gross violation against the indigenous claim of the Lepchas in their land. The Lepcha community, on their part, refused to accept the sovereignty of the new rulers and retain their loyalty to the king of Sikkim. The cost of this so-called insolence was dear for the community. The Lepchas were evicted from their ancestral land, Maya Liang, and had been pushed to remote corners of the hill. Some fled to Kalimpong, which was still under Bhutanese occupation. The British acquired Kalimpong after the Anglo-Bhutan War of 1864. They were further evicted from Kalimpong heartland through the introduction of land revenue settlement around 1900. The British rulers built their imperial edifice in the land of the Lepchas. Roads, railway, administrative buildings, and most importantly, the tea gardens. The rulers required manpower to build the colonial infrastructure, but they could hardly trust the free-spirited Lepchas. The rulers encouraged migration from neighboring countries and states, especially from Nepal. By the beginning of the 20th century, the Nepalese community became a majority in the Darjeeling Hills. Darjeeling turned out to be the cosmopolitan habitat of multiple races and one of the most celebrated tourist destinations in India. Wrong ring. The Lepcha language was the language of majority before the arrival of the British. Dispossession from land had been accompanied with displacement from pristine tradition, culture and language. The Deed of Grant of 1835 was written and signed in both Lepcha and Hindustani language. Captain Lloyd's successor, Dr. Campbell, abandoned the Lepcha language for official correspondence and introduced Hindustani instead. Lepcha language was not altogether abandoned by the early colonizers. It had been used by the Christian missionaries to convert the people. Churches were built in Darjeeling and Kalimpong. The missionaries reduced the language to translate the Bible and Gospels in Lepcha language. In course of time, most Lepchas forgot their language and became Nepali speakers. Lepcha language no longer remained as an aesthetic medium. Colonel G.B. Mannering was an exception to this pattern. An empathetic administrator, as he was, of the British Raj, engaged himself in compiling a grammar of the Lepcha language. A grammar of the wrong Lepcha language as it exists in the Darjeeling and Sikkim hills, first published in 1876. Mannering compiled the grammar with a philanthropic mission to allow the Lepcha race and language to die out would indeed be barbarous and inexpressibly sad. He traced the origin of the Lepcha language far anterior to Hebrew and Sanskrit. The Lepcha community in Darjeeling Hills considers him as a messiah for the community. Mannering's birthday on 18th July is celebrated in Polongdong, the village where Mannering used to live.
The memory of Main Liang gradually faded from the inhabitants of Darjeeling Hills. It was virtually obliterated with the emergence of Gorkhali identity movement, a movement to unite the Gorkha communities in Darjeeling Hills.
Gorkha is the generic name for all the migrant Nepalese communities in Darjeeling Hills. The political movement for the separate Gorkhaland state had been launched in the 1980s. The movement thrived on further exclusion of the Lepcha community for being indigenous community of the land. After long endurance of intimidation, coercion, marginalization and exclusion, the community is able to create an ethnic space and a platform in Darjeeling Hills in 2013 with the establishment of Main Liang Lepcha Development Board under Tribal Welfare Department of the Government of West Bengal. the name of the board is very significant. It symbolizes their attachment to the land from time immemorial, their indigenous entity, and above all, the historic past. MLLDB is an outcome of a long and tedious struggle of the people under the guidance of some outstanding and visionary members of the community of the past and present. The journey had been initiated since around the beginning of the 20th century to trace the indigeneity and their root.
The journey is still in progress, keeping in centerpiece the symbolic space of Mailang, the site of their culture, language, music, aesthetics, and above all, the consciousness.
Early leaders played the most crucial role in infusing the consciousness, the sense of self among people. Athing Sandoshiring Tamsang was the founder president of Lepcha Association of Darjeeling, the early platform to mobilize the community and to create ethnic consciousness. Athing KP Tamsang, a scholar extraordinaire who was a linguist in the School of Oriental and African Studies, London, returned to his land and assumed the responsibility of preparing the ethno-cultural trajectory for the ethnic regeneration of the people. He engaged himself in collecting Lepcha history, language, and folklore to ignite the cultural memory of the indigenous community of the land. He wrote several books on Lepcha folklore, compiled a dictionary, and traditional grammar to reclaim the language.
He did not, talk about the Lepcha language, culture, tradition, and identity. In fact, he worked extremely hard among the Lepchas, especially among the common Lepchas in remote villages. And today, from the scratch, the Lepcha children, Lepcha youths, Lepcha generation are coming up. They are working extremely hard to preserve, conserve, and promote their very rich and ancient language, literature, and culture.
The ethnic and cultural journey had been nourished by other visionaries and dedicated members of the community. Ren Gyanchiring Sitling's Lepcha Primer and Gospels in Lepcha language was the first step to revive the discipline in language. Women also played their role in this ethnic cultural movement. Renu Azem Rebecca Namchu, a sympathizer of nationalist struggle and the first woman president of Lepcha Association. Renu Helen Lepcha was a freedom fighter from Darjeeling Hills. The momentum was never lost through the passage of time. The nonagenarian Lapon Sonam Chiring Lepcha stands as a link between the first and second generation leaders of the cultural movement. He is born with the genius of an artist. He revived traditional Lepcha musical instruments. At the same time, he is also a visionary leader, institution builder, and a poet. Sonam pursued an ethnic resistance through music. He sang and played to demonstrate the rich cultural tradition of his community. Sonam received several awards, including Padma Shri and Sangeet Natak Academy Award. Sonam revived history. Sonam traced the historic past by taking long journeys to the remote corners of the hill and found Gebu Achuk as an icon for the community. Gebu was a part historical, part mythical personality. The Lepcha community attributes great might, valor and magical power to Gebu. As is narrated by the present leaders, Gebu established an independent kingdom in the 17th century in Kalimpong and neighboring regions by defeating the Bhutanese forces. He built forts and regularly resisted the Bhutanese forces against their territorial encroachment in the region. Gebu was ultimately assassinated by the Bhutanese through unfair means. The Lepcha community considers that with the assassination of Gebu, they lost their freedom and glory. The community entered into a dark chapter in their ethnic history, and the darkness persisted over centuries. Every year, the Lepcha community of Kalimpong pays tribute and homage to their glorious king on 20th December in Damsang Hill, which is the site of ruins of Gebu's fort. They celebrate the day with song, dance and other ethnic events. And the event is attended by the Lepchas from distant regions, including Sikkim. Sonam's most enduring contribution is the Ethno-History Museum in Kalimpong, showcasing the Lepcha history and culture, and thereby tracing the root and indigeneity of the Lepchas. It is a unique museum in India as it narrates the history of the Lepcha community from primitive past until they had been drawn under hegemonic existence. The museum is the symbol of their glorious past, a past when they had no shackles, no hegemony, and no attribute of a dying race.
The Lepcha community of the Darjeeling Hills is responding to the new consciousness despite adverse socio-economic condition of the majority of the people.
The people in remote villages have little access to a viable livelihood engagement for subsistence. Access to education in the remote areas is limited, as also other amenities for a dignified living. The present leaders have taken up the challenge to improve material condition of the deprived and depressed. The leaders are aware that the community would not attain empowerment and dignified existence unless they are economically strong. Under the visionary leadership of Ren Lyangsong Tamsang, the chairman of MLLDB and his colleagues have been preparing a roadmap. Firstly, to sensitize all Lepchas of Darjeeling Hills to look back to their indigenous past. Secondly, to arrange for sustainable livelihood for the poor and depressed. And thirdly, to sensitize and empower women in this trajectory. Ren Lyangsong Tamsang, grandson of Sando Chiring Tamsang and son of Athing Kepi Tamsang, took up the legacy of his forefathers to offer dedicated services to his community. A former officer in the British Army, former president of Indigenous Lepcha Tribal Association and current chairman of MLLDB.
In late 70s, my father wrote me a letter. I want you to die working for the downtrodden Lepchas. So I visited remote villages, met my people, the Lepchas, and I saw their conditions, their situations, and the Lepchas were really in a very bad shape. So I had a mission now. I wanted to uplift their socio-economic conditions. I wanted their development. I wanted them to have their dignity, their prestige, their honor as the original indigenous Lepchas of Darjeeling Hills, West Bengal. Initially, I started to mobilize them. I started to bring awareness among them concerning the Lepchas, who we are, and what we could do for ourselves. I organized many things like, of course, seminars, meetings, workshop on Lepcha culture, Lepcha traditions, Lepcha language, Lepcha literature, all these sort of things. And slowly I try to bring them under one roof, under the Lepcha flag. If you go to the remote villages, you'll find the best results about development. I think we have given a very good example, not only to the Lepchas but other communities as well as in West Bengal and perhaps in India also, that a very small community with determination, with their consistency, with their loyalty, with their sincerity, could do things which was not imaginable 10 years or 15 years ago.
The events in remote areas are meant to engender awareness among those people about their indigeneity and cultural roots. The awareness is generated through song, dance, drama, traditional games and food. Young children are encouraged to paint and draw nature and their surroundings. Medicinal plants and roots and regularly exhibited in the events. Ren Lyangsong is also a prolific author who is constantly engaged in reviving folklore and popular myths to engender values, dignity, and self-esteem. He received several awards and honorific from the government. Firm and dedicated, he is engaged in navigating the community in new heights of ethnic progress with his equally dedicated team. Ren G. Namchu, former IAS officer, and present member secretary of MLLDB, is concerned about the socio-economic development of the community. He has initiated large number of development projects.
The Mayalang Lepcha Development Board came into existence in the year 2013 and has been given the responsibility of delivering to the people the most important which they had felt that time were the cultural and safeguarding of the cultural and language and other aspects. And the second part was the development of the general social welfare activities. One scheme which is very popular, that is the wrongly housing scheme. Now, this benefit is given to the poorest of the poor lot, and so far some 4,000 houses have been already built. So 4,000 happy families are there. We also have some other schemes which has met the need of the people, that is the supply of drinking water. As you know, the hills have got some sources here and there of streams running here and there. The other part is that there are vast stretches of areas where there is no streams and where there is no drinking water. During the course of these few years, we have done about 38 such schemes, and we have on the anvil 15 more. So these have provided water, drinking water, to a great number of villages, given a big relief to the women folk of the villages, because the women folk used to carry water and spend a good part of their day and labor.
More importantly, MLLDB is trying to make provisions for people who are in BPL level, who are old and infirm. They are taking care of those people, they are building houses for the people, and they are being looked after.
Ren P.T. Simic adds literary flavor in the ethnic journey. P.T. Simic is an enthusiastic cultural leader.
अभी तक हमने बहुत सा लोक कथा लिखा है और बहुत सा रिकॉपी ओल्ड बुक्स को रिकॉपी किया है, और हमने वैसे नोमेनक्लेचर लिखा है, और गीतांजलि भी हमने बंगला से लेप्चा में कविता के उसमें लिखा है.
The team has translated and published 10 short stories written by Mahashweta Devi in Lepcha language. 2 journals, Achule and Tista Rangeet, are regularly published. Achule is a bilingual magazine focusing on the Lepcha community. Tista Rangeet is a different venture which publishes articles on the culture and tradition of other communities of Darjeeling Hills, a significant venture to forge harmony and connect with other marginal ethnic communities in the region. Ren N.T. Lepcha, Sonam Chiring's eldest son and an ex-serviceman in the Indian Army, organized a musical troupe with young and talented boys and girls.
संपूर्ण भारतवर्ष हमने देखा, वहाँ के समाज, जाति, समुदाय को सभी को देखा, सभी का डेवलप देखा, मगर उस हिसाब से हमारे लेप्चाओं के डेवलपमेंट उतना मैंने खास नहीं देखा. इसलिए मैंने सोचा कि क्यों ना मैं 28 वर्ष तक देश की सेवा किया, और अब मैं जाके अपना जनता, अपना समाज, अपना जाति की सेवा करना.
Ren N.T. travels around India with his troupe to share music of the lectures and has received accolades from far and wide. Creative people such as Gautam Lepcha has been writing novels and short stories in Lepcha language And he is not alone in this literary engagement. Chendup Lepcha is a renowned painter who exhibited his paintings in many national exhibitions. Revival of traditional food habits such as worms, insects, ants, fishes, local fern, moss, etc. as source of protein, vitamin, calcium and other nutrients is part of the new movement. Thereby, Lepcha community is connected to the current global movement to revive the food habits of the indigenous communities to manage food scarcity for the present and future. In the uphill of Lyangsa, there is another small locality surrounded by hills and forests called Lyangsa Kha. The local people are producing indigenous beans with the help of MLLDB. The livelihood projects include revival of traditional handicraft and agriculture, construction of traditional houses, medicinal plants, and many others. We visited a self-help group. Lepchas call it Deptong in a village called Lyangse. The SSG is run by local ladies. The weaving center produces traditional Lepcha clothing material with exquisitely beautiful patterns. It was learned that they have no access to open market due to limited human and financial resources. At present, they are weaving Lepcha dress, which has good local demand. The cultural leaders of Darjeeling Hills have been taking special endeavor to encourage development of language and literature. The board has set up night schools in many remote areas to teach Lepcha language to the children and adults. Lepchas are no longer an insular community. Young people from Europe, US and Canada come in Darjeeling Hills for a short stay to teach English to the children and young adults.
I say that we are extremely grateful and feel very privileged also to be able to spend time in the Lepcha communities. Although we came here to help share our knowledge of the English language,
Jongmit Lepcha is a beneficiary of this exchange program.
An incredibly rich and one of the oldest cultures in the world. We're learning so much about the Lepcha culture.
Indigenous Lepcha Tribal Association and later on MLLDB developed a team for prolific publications on various issues, especially on the history, past and heritage of the community.
The new consciousness dwells on the revival of history, folklore, religion, livelihood, language, dress, education, and above all, a vision about man-nature relationship. the sites of their route. Mount Kanchenjunga, an endangered species of hill partridge, Kohomfo, as they call the bird, are used as the emblem of MLLDB. Both are integrally associated with their folklore and myth. The hill partridge, as it is said, saved the community during a great deluge. The deluge myth is common to all old communities. That happened due to the wrath of the Creator, as the people had been engaged in ravaging the nature. The bird in this case offered chi, drink from fermented millet seed, to pacify the god. The folkloric tradition reflects the indigeneity of the Lepchas in the land. The Rongnu Rangit is a popular myth among the Lepchas. Rongnu is the Lepcha nomenclature for Tista. A large number of religious events are held at the confluence of Tista Rangit, with the chanting and rituals of Mun Bungthing, the traditional priest and priestesses. While the new leadership has been trying to revive Mun Bungthing cult, they are at the same time forging a renewed bonding with nature and the surrounding. Such events are symbolic gestures to claim or reclaim their indigeneity and conceived as a replay of the quintessential tradition of the olden time. The site is connected to the oldest and most popular folklore of the Lepcha community. Rangit, the male river, and Rongnu or Tista, the female, were lovers. Rangit grew unbounded due to his male vanity and started flooding the land, mountain and forest at his whim. He ignored his lover Rongnu or Tista. The Divine Mother became angry with Rangit and curbed his power and forces. The story, as they say, taught them to deplore vanity.
The people are nostalgic about their Sadirlang, a stone which, as they say, used to fall from the sky with lightning.
We let our call when anybody this thunderbolt stone kept their new building, there will not be harm from the thunderstorm bolt.
The stone, or its paste, as it is told, has magical power to cure human and animal, and it is a good omen. Music is the spirit and soul of the life of the Lepchas. From infancy to old age, music accompanies Lepchas on every step of the way. Many of them who did not receive formal education will still instantly compose a song impromptu on a person or an object. They call this the apriya.
adi jumpu oren songrama khamri mo hik butari angsho ka.
The tradition is very much live. Sonam is a maestro in this Apriya tradition, but he is not alone. The Lepcha community is peaceful, non-violent, but resolute for their cause. They pursued peaceful resistance against the then government of West Bengal in 2010 and 2011, when the government proposed to include their ethnic category under the label of Sikkimese tribe. The community took recourse to relay fasting, organized processions, and submitted their petition to the authorities. They protested against Sikkim government's project to construct several dams, especially on Zongu, which is considered by the Lepchas as a sacred land on Teesta River, by collaborating with an organization called Affected Citizens of Teesta.
Lepcha community has a different approach to nature. For example, they have consistently voiced protest against random mountaineering and pointed to the adverse impact on the global environment. Their reverence to nature is intricately linked with their traditional faith and belief.
Lepchas are one of the very few indigenous communities in the world who endured and withstood the onslaughts on their ethnicity, culture, and very existence over centuries. But the community is able to hold on to the root. It is indeed a difficult journey for them, a journey against time.
Rong cướp sông sa y tư liang y purum sa ching lap liang rong kati sa diu mariam o amu en jong liang chu thui kong ten sa nyu kong ai ka bilong chok ka thom bu liang du John Safi Tức Sơn Rin Jong Amu Hu Thu Tum Sung